Hi guys, it's Caroline, and today I'm going to be doing a 5-star prediction challenge. Now, because it's the beginning of the year, I do think it's interesting to pick out the books that I think really have the potential to be the favorites of the year, and that 2021 TBR list that I made for myself are definitely books that I think will be favorites and I think that I really should get around to, but these are books that I just have kind of been peeking out at me recently but didn't get put on that TBR, and I think I really should focus on books that I think have a shot at being 5-star releases. So here are 5 books that I am suspicious I will give 5 stars, but I purposely didn't choose anything that was on that TBR because hopefully my top 10 books that I hope to read this year will also all be 5-star reads. Okay, let's get right into it. First up, I have 100,000 Kingdoms, which is the first book in the Inheritance trilogy. I have the bind up, so that's why it looks so thick. N.K. Jemisin is wonderful. I really loved the 5th season. I'm excited for my dad to read it. I've really pushed it into his hands, and I've recommended it to a lot of people who are fantasy and sci-fi lovers. And I'm excited to jump into this one. It's about gods and mortals and the politics between them. I think the second book may be from the point of view of a god. I don't know a ton about it, but I do know that it does politics really well, but it also kind of delves into what it means to be a god and sort of the archetype of the god versus what makes a human human. I'm really excited for this one, and I think N.K. Jemisin is just stellar. Next up is a book that I don't think I've heard anyone on BookTube talking about, and that is Early Riser by Jasper Fforde. Now, when I was younger, my mom and I read the Air Affair, which is these Thursday Next novels, which is by Jasper Fforde, and it's about characters that are in books, and it has a lot of references to literary, just different classics in literature. And there's detective. I think the first one is Humpty Dumpty is Cracked. And they're really funny and cute. This is a complete standalone written by the same author who has a real whimsical and funny, but also kind of a caustic vibe to his writing, which I really appreciated when I was a teenager, even though half of the classics I wasn't even that familiar with, and I want to reread those because now I am familiar with the classics. But Early Riser is about humans, except for every winter we hibernate, and the main character of this novel is in charge of making sure that the human hibernation goes along smoothly. The only thing is there are these viral dreams that everyone is having, and then the person who's kind of in charge of figuring out and getting to the bottom of these dreams everyone's having, then they start to have the dreams, and it's sort of a mystery what's going on. I think it'll be interesting because the idea of something that's going viral and we're living in a pandemic, but not actually a pandemic, might be interesting to read about without being too stressful. And also I just love the vibe of his works and how they're kind of whimsical, but they're not afraid to be sardonic. Yeah, I just think this is a really interesting and specific plot that I haven't heard much about, so I really want to read it, and I think I'm really going to enjoy it. Next up is The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. Now, I've been on a Brandon Sanderson kick ever since I discovered Mistborn last year. I've now read Mistborn and Starsight and Skyward, and I'm really excited to get into his other adult Cosmere works. And so I just think jumping into this that I'm gonna love it. I also have Elantris, which I really am excited about, but that is one of his earlier books, and people say the writing's not quite as good. So between The Way of Kings and Elantris, I picked The Way of Kings. I also am just a sucker for a really long, more complicated fantasy. I do think Game of Thrones are really, the Game of Thrones books are really, really great, but I always feel like I bump them up a little bit in rating when I do rate them, just because there's something about a fantasy that's that long that if you can keep my interest for long enough to finish it and weave everything together, there's something really masterful about that. And I'm just so excited for this book. I stare at it every night on my shelves, and I'm like, I can't wait to pick this up. And I'm almost certain this is going to be a 5-star read, just like Mistborn was. Next up is Once Upon a River by Diane Setterfeld. Now, this is a kind of literary fiction that's described as a tapestry of stories woven together. It's about a bunch of people who are in a bar, and a man comes in holding a girl who seems to be dead, and they don't know what's going on, why she's there, how she became hurt. They start telling stories, and remarkably, hours later, the girl comes back to life, and they don't know how. I've heard that this is just sort of a winding story that you don't know what's happening and where it's taking you until you get there, and then you're really surprised and, fascinated about both the journey and the destination, and I think that's the perfect kind of book for me. I really predict this will be one of those things that either really flops or just absolutely crushes it, and I really hope it crushes it. I've heard a lot of good things about it, and also it's just like a beautiful cover. I mean, look at this. Look at it. But anyway, I think this will be a 5-star read. And then finally, this is probably cheating, but I predict that The Burning God is going to be a 5-star read. Now, this is the 3rd book in the Poppy War trilogy. You will not be surprised to hear me talk about this because I talk about the Poppy War all the time, partially because I love it and partially because I have been anticipating this book for forever, it feels like, and I just haven't gotten around to reading it. I've heard, no spoilers, but I have heard that the ending is not what many people were anticipating. However, I don't know that I have an ending that I'm anticipating because I just know that R.F. Kuang will destroy me, and that's my only expectation. So I think the only thing that would surprise me is if like all the characters ran off into the sunset at the end. So a lot of people were surprised because this has a lot of historical roots, although it is not like a one-to-one by any means, but it is really influenced by the Opium Wars and other Japanese and Chinese history. I do think a lot of people she talks about this being an allegory for how she thinks those wars and those conflicts should have been resolved or how they might have ended. But I don't know enough about the actual like real life history and how it did fully end exactly to have an idea of how I think that this very smart historian, like scholar, who is also an author, thinks it should have ended versus how it did end. Like, I don't have expectations. I just think it's going to blow me away like it did so many other people, and I think I'm not going to give myself expectations because I think she's going to do something that's better than whatever I could come up with. So I'm just going to trust her and trust that she's going to break my heart, but I do have to get around to reading this. I do think it's cheating because it's the 3rd book in a trilogy that the first 2 books have just absolutely blown me away, but I'm going with it. All right, so those are my 5-star predictions, and I will check back in on the wonderful day where I have somehow gotten through all of these books, and we'll see if I was right or if I was horribly mistaken. I hope I'm right, though. All right, that's it for today. Bye!